It's time for a round of your questions and my answers. And it's Monochrome March, so we'll be doing this one in black and white. I have questions about traveling with gear, about photography, accessories, and more. So let's get to it. The first question today is from Kyle. He says, you go on backpack/hiking trips a lot, I've noticed. A problem I'm always running into is I want to pack my camera, a couple lenses, maybe a tripod, and a few excess pieces, but I also want to pack a snack, possibly some extra clothes, depending on the duration of the trip. What packs do you find the most convenient for a mix of hiking readiness and camera protective friendliness? How do you balance the two? Well, I do hike a lot, and I use my CamelBak for everything. I love it. I actually have a video that tells you exactly which one I use and what I keep in it. I rarely bring a lot of gear, but when I do bring something other than what's around my neck, I put it in my pack along with everything else. I usually put it in some sort of soft bag, like a lens bag. I keep my food in a separate Ziploc bag and my trash in another Ziploc, and then extra layers of clothes and my wallet and an extra camera battery, my headlamp, and whatever else. They all get tossed in there too. And then water goes in the bladder compartment. I am careful with my pack so I don't have any issues. And now it sounds like you prefer to bring a lot of stuff, so a CamelBak might not be right for you. I have seen several options from companies like Lowepro, which marry the idea of a camera bag and the idea of a hydration pack, similar to my CamelBak. I have seen a few people with bags like that out and about, and they seem like a good option for you if you want to have extra protection for your camera gear. Brian says, I travel a lot and have rigid restrictions on my baggage, so having the long glass from Nikon is not an option. Think the Nikkor 500mm f4e and similar. And I have not been all that happy with the Rokinon mirror lenses. What suggestions would you give for solving this dilemma? I do quite a bit of landscape photography, lunar, and birds. While the mirror lens is great on super bright days for full moons, handheld creates 9 bad takes out of 10, and even on a tripod, any vibration ruins the shot. 500 millimeters, that lens would be big to travel with, and also not so good for handheld shooting. I struggle myself with this when I'm going on a trip or a hike. When you want telephoto and you don't want anything very large, it's a tall order. And it will depend on your camera too. The largest lens that I have is the 70-200 f2.8. It's large but manageable for handheld shooting and can even be extended with a teleconverter. I have a 1.7x teleconverter that I use with it sometimes. Even that lens is large though, so thinking smaller, I've looked at the 70-300 f4.5 to f5.6 lens. It's an FX lens, so you could use it on full frame or cropped sensor bodies. I've owned the older pre-VR version of this lens a couple of times, but the aperture range is a bit limiting if you shoot a lot in low light. And it's still not exactly a lightweight lens. If you're hooked on constant aperture, the 70-200 f4 is worth a look, but again, this is not exactly 500 millimeters. There's a niche of bird watchers who have embraced the Nikon 1 series as the crop factor is 2.7x. My Nikon V1 is a small body, and you can use this adapter for f-mount lenses, and a 200 millimeter zoom gives you the field of view of a full frame 540 millimeter lens. Sarker wants to know, I'd love to know your opinion and or experience about using a light meter for perfect aperture and why. Some top photographers advise to use it, some make fun of it. I never used one, but I'm interested to know more. The same goes for using a gray card for white balance. Now, I don't make fun of anything. Everyone has their own preferences for what works for them. I don't use an external light meter. I do use the one that is in my camera, typically center weighted, unless I'm using strobes or other off-camera flash. In the studio, I know my setup, so it's pretty quick for me to adjust settings to get different lighting looks and depth of field effects. In the field, I'm usually center weighted metering, setting either the aperture I want for the shot, the shutter speed, or both. I usually don't want my camera telling me which aperture to use though, In almost all cases, I'm choosing the aperture for the creative effect that I'm after. Franklin asks, what would you recommend as a decent travel tripod for a beginner? Not too expensive because you're still finding your feet within photography and you can always upgrade later on. I like this Amazon Basics tripod. You can find a link to it in the description of this video. It is inexpensive and it serves my purposes just fine. In fact, my camera's on one right now. Later on down the road, if you find that you need something more, you won't have spent a lot and you can get something else. If you grow with the inexpensive tripod, a ball head can be a wonderful thing, but a good one is going to cost you some money. I would work inexpensively and then see if it's something that you find yourself using often. Chuck says, I will be heading to Yellowstone National Park in mid-June. Any recommendations on the must-shoot locations or tips on some not overcrowded locations? Thanks. I wish I did. I actually plan to head to Yellowstone this year myself, so I'll be doing some research as well. I can say that it is my experience with national parks that their park websites are fantastic for checking out locations. But then if you can, talk to a ranger when you get there at the visitor center or out and about. They can often give you tips on less crowded places. Also, when you go to the places that are marked on the map, as long as it's allowed, don't be afraid to go away from that spot a little bit. For example, at the Grand Canyon, there are overlooks with guardrails and great views. But if you go just a little ways off the edge of the canyon, you won't have a guardrail in front of you, and you'll have a little bit of solitude. Adam asks, do you recommend any books on law for photographers, or do you know of anything that will teach me more about that? There are so many different laws that apply to photography, to copyright, contracts, liability, and more. And different laws in different countries and different states. And a lot of the laws are fairly subjective. It's kind of unfortunate. The American Civil Liberties Union has a nice section on photographer rights in relation to being stopped or detained for photographing something in public. If you're looking for specific legal advice, though, the best place to start is with the right sort of attorney in your area. For example, if you're looking for business law for photographers who work with clients, you need a business and contracts-oriented attorney. If you're looking for advice as to creating and selling art, then you're looking for something a little bit different. I'd like to help you more, but again, this is a wide open question. Arijit says, so my question is, what feature makes Nikon better than Canon and what makes Canon better than Nikon? If you have already answered this question, please share the link of it. Well, it's an age-old question. Which is better? Canon versus Nikon or any other brand? It's really all about personal preference. In fact, camera choice within each brand is all about personal preference. Each camera has different specifications, sometimes only slightly different, and each one feels different in your hands and it functions differently. So I know it's not the sexy answer. It's more fun to have someone rant about which one is better and why, but it's the truth. The best brand and the best camera is going to be based on your individual needs and preferences. Kevin says, if you could go back in time and photograph any celebrity, who would it be and what would the shoot's theme be? Hello, Kevin. What an interesting question. A celebrity. I read this question a couple days ago and I've been thinking about it. My initial thought was Pablo Picasso. He may have popped into my head because I just finished reading a book about him. And then I realized that he would probably be a pain to photograph because he was quite temperamental, but I think it still might be fun. He was intense and handsome. He didn't care a thing for the rules and really followed his own passion for expressing himself in new and different ways. There are photographs of him, but I'd love to photograph him working. I think people are the most beautiful when they are doing something that they love. So I would try to capture his intensity in natural light, in his natural environment. I think that would be something. And my last question is from Michael. You seem to travel a lot into northern Arizona. I'm wondering if you ever travel down to southern Arizona. I do. I haven't in a while though, and I'm probably due for a trip. I've been wanting to take some photos of San Javier del Bac and some of the surrounding areas. Of course, we're headed into the hot season, so it'll probably have to wait until fall. I think they just lifted some of the restrictions in Organ Pipe National Monument too, which I really like, and I haven't been there in years. That's it, friends. Thank you for your questions. And if you want to see more of my Q&A videos, check out the playlist above.